I want to show you one clip from that presentation of Netanyahu. Watch this.
Now, just as malicious lies were leveled for centuries at the Jewish people, malicious lies are now being leveled at the Jewish state. No, don't applaud. Listen. The outrageous slanders that paint Israel as racist and genocidal are meant to delegitimize Israel, to demonize the Jewish state, and to demonize Jews everywhere. And no wonder we've witnessed an appalling rise of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. My friends, whenever and wherever we see the scourge of anti-Semitism, we must unequivocally condemn it and resolutely fight it, without exception.
I mean, that one really, of all of them, there's a bunch of cringeworthy statements that he made, but that was among the worst of them because, number one, it's filled with just insane amounts of inaccurate, i.e. lies, things that he said, just factually untrue. And then he started twisting around some things that did happen and gave them a different meaning. But what might have been worse, or at least as bad, is that he basically was like a little puppeteer, just using the members of Congress as a prop. I mean, look at that. They started to make an applause, and he's like, no, don't do that. Sit there. I'm not finished yet. I want to keep going on. He didn't want the applause line there. He was going to build up to it rhetorically and emotionally, and he wanted, that almost fist pounding on the lectern moment to where everyone would then shoot up out of their feet, which they dutifully did. And I found that just embarrassing how easily we're manipulated by someone who is taking actions that are in his own, that is harming his own interest, those of his country and our country. And we're just turning a blind eye to it all. And in fact, not merely a blind eye, but we're giving raucous applause to it. And it anguishes me because as I've talked about so many times on previous episodes of this, going back months now, is that the path that Netanyahu is on will not accomplish the stated political objective, which is to bring peace and security to the people of Israel. He's saying that because of the heinous attack that did happen on October 7th, where Hamas terrorists did kill many innocent Israelis, thousands, many hundreds of them, that deserves to be responded to, like any nation would do. Of course, they had every right to respond to what happened to that. But it matters how you do it, because you can't say that this violation of human rights and of international law is going to be met with an even bigger violation of human rights and international law on a scale 30-1. Not an exaggeration, an actual number. It's actually higher than that. Could be a lot higher than that. The number of people that were murdered by Hamas on October 7th is dwarfed by the number of innocent Palestinians who have been murdered since that time. And that's why the ICJ haven't reached the ruling that it did, and why further action is necessary. And that's why you see the continued statement where the other things that Israel has done that's illegal, and especially with these settlers and all the things that go along with that, those things are based on evidence and extensive amounts of research and study and legal effects, not just somebody casting an accusation. It was based on very thorough evidence. And it's right before your eyes. You don't even have to hardly, look for it. You almost have to close your eyes not to see it. And it is so wide and so egregious, because what Netanyahu is doing is going to harm Israel. Listen to me. If you're a friend of Israel, and if you love the Jewish people, and I do in both cases, then you should push back against what Netanyahu is doing and his government, which it's not just him, it's many in his government. He's not the only one. And there's many in Israel also who support it, but they're in their blind hatred because of what happened on 10/7. They are laying the foundation to harm their own country, because every time you kill an innocent Palestinian person, you build more and more hatred towards Israel and the IDF than existed even before October 7th. So now then, instead of whatever the actual number was, 20, 30,000 members of the Hamas military wing, now then you've probably got many times more men who are willing to fight, to do whatever it takes to go against Israel now, because of all the innocent people. I mean, what does anybody think that's going to happen? Does anybody have this rational thought that Israel can go in there and claim legitimate collateral damage. Well, it's just the laws of war say if you're going after a target and they were using it, well, the blame is on them. That works when you're trying to convince a friendly audience that what you're doing is right, because they'll just go, yeah, that's right. That's part of the warfare. It does zero on the other side of that equation. And the one that matters is what happens on the other side of that equation. And when their people are killed and they know they didn't do anything wrong, and they see that they're just getting slaughtered, they see that their entire way of life is being wiped out, they see that their city is physically being destroyed so that it can't even sustain life well into the future, even if the war ended tomorrow, they're going to hate the people who did it, and they won't accept any of that. So it's a human response. We've seen it throughout human history, throughout the world. We're no exception to that. I mean, just look at our revolutionary period and how we reacted when we were being treated unjustly, and when the British tried to bring in military force. That's how our ancestors reacted. Why does anybody think that the Palestinians are any different than we were, or any other people for that matter? So we're giving raucous applause to someone who is taking his country down a path that will create more instability, less security, and increase the risk that the war may even spread beyond its current boundaries. That's what's happening right now. And of course, we're just continuing to give all the weapons and ammunition and political cover and diplomatic cover so that they can continue doing these things that make no sense and will not help the people that we claim that we love. Listen to me carefully. Understand this. I don't care if you're even angry at what I'm saying here. It doesn't make any difference to me, because you're harming, your actions are actually harming the people you claim to want to help. And this is a long-term issue, and it is desperately worse than it was on the 6th of October of last year. So there needs to be a change if there's to be any hope of limiting the damage and at least getting to a place to where Israel can have legitimate security and stability on its country, which I heartily desire. I want to see the Israeli people live in peace and not have to worry about rockets flying in anywhere or terrorist activity, etc. But folks, if it's not concurrent with the Palestinian people also having peace and security and a future and a hope, and the not have to worry about an oppressive military occupation knocking on their doors at all hours, or taking people away, summarily executing them, or taking them into prison, they deserve the same thing. And if you don't have peace and security for both, you will have peace and security for neither. And even if you only care about the Israeli people, you should adopt and advocate what I just said about making sure that both of them have a future and a possible hope, because without it, your side won't get it. Now, I say that we should get some changes, and I hope that we do. But if we think that this coming election in America may be a way to get through that, or maybe get that change, not a lot of prospects for that. Because after Netanyahu finished with Congress up there, he went down to Mar-a-Lago to see President Trump, who's hopefully going to be, in his view, will win in November. Here's how that one went.
Did you guys talk about what your working relationship would look like if you were reelected in November?
We don't have to. We've had a good relationship. I was very good to Israel, better than any president's ever been. And we did so many Golan Heights. We did Jerusalem, the capital. We actually built the embassy at Jerusalem, and the Iran nuclear deal. Unfortunately, the Biden administration didn't do anything. We terminated the Iran nuclear deal, which was a tremendous thing, maybe the best thing that I did for Israel, but unfortunately the Biden administration didn't do anything about it. We could have had a deal 1 week after the election. We would have had a deal with Iran, and everybody would have been happy. But they didn't do anything with it. We had all the cards. Iran was not using terror at all, because under the Trump administration, we gave them no money. They didn't have money. Nobody was buying their oil. And now they're a rich country. So it's too bad. But we would have had a deal with Iran, and it would have been a good deal for everybody, including Iran. It would have been a good deal, but it would have saved the Middle East. The Biden administration, now she's taken over, and she's worse than him. She's actually worse than him. So we'll see how it goes. But if it all works out, if we win, it'll be very simple. It's all going to work out, and very quickly. If we don't, you're going to end up with major wars in the Middle East and maybe a third world war.
So you had President Trump there just rattling off the lineage of things that he did, which basically he's saying, yeah, I can be even more pro-Israel than the current administration, which is doing a terrible job. And he talked about how he moved the capital to Jerusalem, and then extensively went on talking about what he's doing to Iran, Israel's arch enemy in the region. And listen, folks, you may be big Trump supporters, some of you, and that's fair enough. Anybody can take whatever choice they want, but let's be clear about something. This getting rid of the joint JCPOA, the Iran nuke deal in May of 2018, has been a disaster for our interests, and it has continued to exacerbate things, because prior to that, even if it was flawed and the JCPOA was flawed, but it was a significant constraint on Iranian capabilities, on their ability to produce fissile material, which was being at an extremely low. I want to say it was 3 to 5% of purity. Now it's up to 60%. The amount of material that they had was minuscule, only for research purposes. Now it's huge stockpile. All of which because we got out of the agreement and gave up what leverage we had, and then we've increased the fears of the Iranian side. So many of them may now be thinking maybe they should go to a nuclear weapons program as the only way to ensure that they could keep us from coming in and attack them, because you have people like John Bolton always talking about, almost lusting after wanting to attack Iran. I mean, he's just always advocating that. So are many others in really both parties. So it's not likely that there's going to be a big change if Trump wins. But now then that Biden himself is not running, but current Vice President Kamala Harris is, one might say, well, what would her position be? Here's what she said, I think right after the Netanyahu speech at Congress.
It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination.
Now, let's be clear. That was basically a campaign commercial, because now everything she does is like 90% a campaign commercial to try and show how she's presidential. And you see in that, I mean, he had all the trappings of president, and she actually looked presidential then, and especially in contrast to Joe Biden, who's, struggling to even get sentences out, as we've talked about before. But she also laid out this long list of things that she wants to see. She wants peace for Israel. She wants return of all the hostages who are still being held in the Gaza Strip, and peace for Palestine, and a two-state solution. Problem is, that is exact opposite of what Netanyahu has emphatically said that he wants. And so she basically put a lot of things that said, hey, it would be great if I could eat all the food I want and never gain any weight. If I could go to Mars and back on Tuesday, stuff that's pie in the sky that has no possibility of being realized at all. And when you know that Netanyahu is adamantly opposed to any possibility of a two-state solution, and his whole career, and I'm talking his entire career, going back into the 90s, has emphatically been to prevent that very thing. So the same way that you had Biden saying before that, two-state solution is important. He said it at the State of the Union address. It's something we're going to go. And then right after, you always had Netanyahu publicly saying, no, we're not going to do it. We've had red lines about Rafah and some other places. And instead, they went ahead and did that anyway. No one listens to what the White House says. And then why should they, when you see stuff like what happened Wednesday at the Capitol building? So not a lot of prospects that we're going to get a lot of change there. I hope we do, because if, as I've emphasized so hard here, if there's not changes in how Israel is doing its business here, it's going to be harmed, and the Palestinian people are going to continue to be harmed, and the chance of an additional explosion, maybe even larger and more regional, could result.